Buckle up for this deep dive, listeners, because today we're going deep into some pretty intense prayer language.
Intense is one word for it.
Yeah, and it's all thanks to you guys sending in so many requests to unpack this kind of stuff.
Always eager to get into the weeds.
Well, we're diving straight into the source, right from a transcript of Prayer Points TV on YouTube.
Oh, wow, that's
Yeah, and let me tell you, this charismatic Christian prayer really doesn't hold back when it comes to themes of vengeance and deliverance.
It's interesting how it really just dives right into this worldview.
Right.
Where the divine is actively involved in confronting evil.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just about asking for good things,
Yeah.
It's about really engaging in a spiritual battle.
Right.
It's almost like calling on God's power for very specific interventions.
Yeah, and the language is so vivid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, phrases like God of vengeance, fire,
Yeah.
fire, fire, and even roaring lions.
Yeah.
It definitely creates a strong emotional tone.
It really does, and that intensity is intentional.
Is it?
It really is.
Right.
I mean, charismatic Christianity really emphasizes experiencing the presence of God,
Yeah.
but in a very direct and emotional way.
Right.
So this kind of prayer, it aims to evoke powerful feelings, almost like tapping into a spiritual energy source,
I see.
and directing it towards a specific goal.
So it's not just reciting words, it's about feeling them deeply.
Exactly.
Is that where this whole concept of spiritual warfare comes in?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
The idea is that everyday problems aren't just these random occurrences.
Right.
They are sometimes seen as attacks from demonic forces.
Okay.
And these forces are working against God's will, and prayer becomes a way to confront them head on.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's also this incredibly detailed list of specific issues.
Oh, yeah.
Cancer, seizures, financial problems,
Right.
relationship struggles. It's like a spiritual laundry list of things to be delivered from.
Yeah, and that speaks to a core belief in charismatic Christianity.
Does it?
It does. Divine healing and deliverance. The prayer really shows how faith is viewed as this potent force, capable of overcoming any obstacle.
Right.
And prayer acts as a direct line to access God's miraculous power.
It's interesting how this prayer repeatedly uses this metaphor of a cutting edge. What's the significance of that image?
It's such a potent image.
Is it?
Yeah, it represents spiritual sharpness, the ability to cut through obstacles
Yeah.
and achieve victory in the spiritual battle.
Right.
It emphasizes having a faith that is effective and can bring about real change.
So it's like a call to sharpen your faith,
Exactly.
to make it a more powerful force in this ongoing spiritual conflict.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that constant focus on battling evil lead to a sense of anxiety and fear?
It could.
I mean, does this prayer promote a healthy relationship with God?
Well, that's a thought-provoking question, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
While the idea of God as a vengeful protector might be comforting, it does raise some complex theological and ethical questions.
Right.
Like, how does this concept of vengeance reconcile with the New Testament's message of love and forgiveness?
Okay.
And what are the potential consequences
Yeah.
of viewing your faith solely through the lens of spiritual warfare?
Definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
We've been exploring the language and the themes of this charismatic prayer. But to really understand it fully, we need to look at the bigger picture, right?
Right.
So how does this prayer fit into the historical context of Christian thought?
Well, you have to remember that the idea of divine vengeance isn't unique to charismatic Christianity.
Oh, okay.
It has roots in the Old Testament, where
Wow.
God's wrath and judgment are pretty prominent themes.
Right. Those Old Testament stories are pretty intense.
They are.
But how did this concept of divine vengeance evolve
Yeah.
with the arrival of Jesus and the New Testament?
Well, the New Testament introduces a more nuanced perspective.
Okay.
Jesus acknowledges God's judgment, but he really emphasizes love, forgiveness, and compassion.
Right.
He teaches turning the other cheek, loving your enemies,
Yeah.
and praying for those who persecute you.
So there's this tension between the Old Testament God of wrath and the New Testament God of love.
Right.
So how does charismatic Christianity navigate this?
Well, charismatic Christianity draws from both the Old and New Testaments,
Okay.
emphasizing God's miraculous power.
Okay.
and willingness to intervene in our lives,
Right.
for good or for ill.
Okay.
They often interpret biblical passages about God's judgment and wrath
Yeah.
as evidence of his active involvement in battling evil.
So even within charismatic Christianity, there's a range of perspectives on divine vengeance
Yeah,
and how it should be understood.
absolutely.
Okay.
Some might emphasize the protective aspect of God's vengeance,
Uh-huh.
seeing it as a shield against evil.
Right.
Others might focus on the retributive aspect,
Okay.
calling for God to punish their enemies.
It seems like this concept of vengeance is inherently complex, with both positive and negative interpretations.
Absolutely.
This prayer definitely raises a lot of questions about how different branches of Christianity approach these ideas.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's why exploring these different viewpoints and understanding the historical and theological context
Right.
that shapes them is so important.
Right.
It helps us critically evaluate their implications,
Okay.
both individually and within a larger social context.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, you know.
Yeah.
We've delved into this powerful prayer. We've explored the concept of divine vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
And we've started to unpack the context of charismatic Christianity.
Right.
But what does this mean for people praying this way today?
Mhm.
How does it affect their lives,
Yeah.
their relationships?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we'll be looking at in part 2 of this deep dive.
Yeah. So picking up right where we left off, it's really interesting how this prayer really zones in on very specific fears and anxieties. We see everything from illness and financial struggles
Right.
to relationship problems, even those feelings of spiritual attack.
It's almost like a list of every possible thing that could go wrong.
It is, yeah.
And the prayer offers this very direct response. Call on the God of vengeance
Right.
to take care of your enemies, break any curses,
Right.
and just deliver you from all that trouble.
And that directness is really key.
Is it?
It is.
Okay.
This kind of prayer can actually provide a sense of control in a world that often feels chaotic
Yeah.
and unpredictable.
Right.
It gives you this framework for understanding suffering and hardship
Okay.
by attributing them to outside forces,
What?
whether it's demonic attacks, curses, or the actions of enemies
Right.
that can be overcome through prayer.
So it's a way to make sense of bad things happening, to feel like you're not just a victim,
Exactly.
but an active participant in this spiritual battle.
Exactly. It empowers the individual to fight back, you
Yeah.
know, to reclaim their agency
Yeah.
and believe they can influence events through prayer.
Okay.
This can be incredibly appealing,
I bet.
especially for people who feel marginalized,
Yeah.
powerless, or overwhelmed by life's challenges.
It sounds like a spiritual call to action.
It is, yeah.
Like a way to reclaim your power
Mm,
and push back against whatever's holding you down.
exactly.
But isn't there a danger in attributing everything bad that happens to demonic forces?
There is.
I mean, could that lead to paranoia
Mm-hmm.
and blaming others
Yeah.
instead of taking responsibility for your own actions?
Well, that's a crucial point.
Okay.
While this worldview can offer comfort and strength,
Yeah.
it can also lead to suspicion,
Okay.
fear,
Right.
and a black and white view of the world.
Right.
Us versus them, good versus evil.
Yeah.
This can strain relationships,
Sure.
create division within communities,
Yeah.
and make it difficult to engage in constructive dialogue
Right.
with those who hold different beliefs.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even the most well-intentioned beliefs can have unintended consequences.
They can.
Yeah.
It's important to find that balance, you know, between faith and reason,
Right.
the spiritual and the practical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads us to another significant aspect of this prayer.
Okay.
Its emphasis on tangible results.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about feeling closer to God or finding inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
It's about seeing concrete changes,
Right.
healing from illness,
Yeah.
financial breakthroughs,
Yeah.
victory over enemies.
Exactly.
I see that in the repetition of phrases like, you know, receive it right now, fire, fire, fire,
Yeah.
and let the lion roar.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there's an attempt to will these things into being
Mm-hmm.
through the sheer force of the prayer.
Right. And that reflects a core charismatic belief in the power of spoken words,
Cool.
declarations of faith that can release spiritual forces
Uh,
and bring about tangible results. It's about aligning your will with God's will,
okay.
believing that you can partner with God to create miraculous changes.
Do you think this kind of prayer encourages a transactional view of faith?
That's an insightful question.
It is.
It is, and one that theologians have debated for centuries.
Wow.
It brings up the age-old question
Yeah.
of free will versus divine intervention.
Right.
Well, this type of prayer can be a powerful tool,
Yeah.
for connecting with the divine,
Right.
for finding strength and comfort during tough times,
Yeah.
and for believing in the possibility of transformation.